On a frozen riverbank in Wisconsin, a retired Navy SEAL found a German Shepherd barely holding on. The dog had no voice left, only trembling legs and eyes fixed somewhere downriver. Logan Pierce thought he was only saving one wounded animal from the snow. But Remy was trying to return to a forgotten camp of elderly neighbors the town had stopped seeing. A contractor called them a problem, the river called them witnesses, and one broken dog refused to let them disappear. Before the thaw was over, Logan would have to choose between fighting alone and standing with the people Remy still guarded. Tell us where you're watching from, share your thoughts after the story, and please like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Winter had made North Haven beautiful in the way a locked door could be beautiful. The whole town lay beneath a clean white silence, roofs softened by snow, bare maples shining with frost, the Elden River glimmering beyond the pines like a long blade half buried in the earth. From a distance, Wisconsin looked peaceful that morning, almost merciful. But Logan Pierce had learned long ago that distance made liars of landscapes. He stood on the back porch of his cabin before sunrise, one hand wrapped around a chipped black mug, the other resting inside the pocket of his waxed canvas coat. He was 49, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of strength that did not ask to be noticed. His face was clean-shaven, sharply cut at the jaw and cheekbones, handsome in a hard American way. His dark undercut had gone silver at the sides, not enough to make him old, just enough to make him look weathered by things colder than winter. Under the coat, he wore the olive-drab combat shirt he still reached for most mornings without thinking. Camouflage sleeves, faded at the elbows, dark horizontal bands at the biceps. It was not a uniform anymore, not officially. But some men did not know how to dress for peace. The cabin behind him was too quiet. 3 years earlier, Marin had stood in that same kitchen with a suitcase beside her boot and tears she had grown tired of explaining. She had not shouted. Logan sometimes wished she had. Anger gave a man something to push against. Her sadness had been worse. It had stood there soft and exhausted, asking him to come up from the deep place where he had buried the dead, the mistakes, the missions that never truly ended. You came home, she had told him, but you never came back. He hadn't known how to answer, so she left. Since then, Logan had turned the cabin into a bunker with windows. Everything had its place. The boots by the door, the firewood stacked by size, the coffee in a tin, the old brass compass from his father on the kitchen shelf, its scratched lid polished by years of Logan's thumb. There were no photographs on the mantel anymore, no music, no spare chair pulled out from the table. A house could survive without warmth if the man inside it convinced himself he did not deserve any. That morning, the sky was pale blue and mercilessly clear. Snow fell lightly, not in a storm, but in small, patient flakes that drifted as if they had all the time in the world. Logan set the mug inside, pulled on his gloves, and took the narrow footpath down toward Elden River. He told himself he was checking the riverbank. That was partly true. The thaw had been strange that year. Daylight softened the snow too early. Night hardened it again into a crust that cracked underfoot like old glass. The river had begun making sounds beneath the ice, low and hollow, the kind of groaning that made old-timers in town look out their windows and mutter about bad timing. Logan did not believe in omens. He believed in weight, temperature, pressure, and men who failed to respect all three. The path sloped through birch and pine, down toward a bend where the water pushed black and slow beneath broken sheets of ice. Elden River was not wide there, but it was deep enough to keep secrets. Snow had gathered along the banks in smooth white shelves. Here and there, dark stones showed through like knuckles. Logan was halfway down when he heard it. A scrape. He stopped. The forest stayed still around him. No wind, no birds, only the river's muffled shifting beneath ice. Then it came again. A weak scratching sound, not branch against bark, not ice settling. Something alive, small in strength but desperate in purpose. Logan moved toward the sound, boots careful on the slick slope. One hand went automatically toward the folding knife clipped inside his coat. Old habits rose without permission. Measure the ground. Read the shadows. Do not hurry unless hurry has earned the right. At the edge of the bank, he saw a shape below him, half hidden beside a shelf of snow-crusted ice. Black and gold fur. A German shepherd lay on its side near the frozen river, body jerking in short, awful tremors. Its legs kicked once, then stiffened. Its muzzle was wet with foam and snow. The dog's ribs moved too fast beneath a coat that should have been thick and proud, but now lay clumped and dirty against its body. "Easy," Logan said, though the word felt useless the moment it left him. The dog's head twitched toward his voice. Male, full-grown, 6 years old maybe. Large frame, deep chest, black saddle across the back, legs the color of dead grass under winter sun. One ear stood unevenly. The other had a small scar near the tip that made it tilt as if listening to a different world. His eyes were dark amber brown, glassy with pain, yet somehow still focused past Logan, downriver. Not at him, past him. Logan crouched slowly. The snow soaked through one knee of his pants. The dog's lips pulled back for half a second, not in aggression so much as terror, even poisoned, freezing, and nearly spent. He was trying to decide whether the man above him was another danger. "Fair," Logan murmured. "I wouldn't trust me either." The dog shuddered. His paws clawed weakly at the snow. Logan knew enough not to waste time guessing. He did not know what the animal had eaten. Rotten bait, chemical waste, something set out with cruel intention, something dumped by stupidity. The difference mattered later. Right now, the dog was fading beside a river too cold to forgive delays. Logan pulled off his coat. The air bit immediately through the combat shirt beneath, slicing through the olive fabric and the camouflage sleeves like thin knives. He ignored it, spreading the coat on the snow before sliding one arm beneath the dog's chest and the other beneath his hips. The German shepherd convulsed once, hard enough that Logan almost lost his grip. "Stay with me," he said. The words struck him strangely. He had said them before, in places far from Wisconsin, over men with blood on their uniforms, over voices cracking through radios, over names that still woke him some nights, with his hands clenched around nothing. He had said them like an order then, as if death might respect rank if spoken to sharply enough. This dog did not know rank. He only knew pain. Logan wrapped him in the coat and lifted. The shepherd was heavier than he looked. Dead weight, almost, but not dead, not yet. Logan climbed the slope slowly, boots punching into snow, breath burning in his chest. Twice the dog's body seized against him. Twice Logan stopped, braced, waited, and went on. By the time he reached the cabin, sweat had gone cold along his spine. Inside, the house seemed offended by the sudden emergency. Its clean counters, stacked wood, and quiet walls had no place for a dying dog. Logan laid the shepherd on an old wool blanket near the hearth and started a fire with hands that moved faster than thought. Then he called Noelle Carver. She answered on the fourth ring, voice thick with sleep and winter irritation. "Pierce? Dog by Elden River, German shepherd. Seizing, possible poison." Silence vanished from her end of the line. "How long ago?" "Minutes. He's alive." "Do not give him food. Small water only if he can swallow. Keep him warm but not hot. I'm coming." "You know a vet?" "I know 3. One owes me because I pulled his truck out of a ditch last March." She hung up before he could thank her. Logan looked down at the dog. The shepherd's breath came ragged and shallow. His eyes kept shifting toward the back door, toward the river, toward something beyond the cabin walls. Logan knelt beside him, but did not touch more than necessary. The old brass compass sat on the kitchen shelf above them. For some reason, Logan noticed it then. His father had carried it on ore boats across the Great Lakes, back when men believed metal, weather, and stubbornness could feed a family. The compass did not point perfectly anymore. Its needle wavered, especially in cold weather. Logan had kept it anyway. Some things were allowed to be broken if they had once helped someone find the way home. A hard tremor ran through the dog. Logan lowered one hand near his muzzle, palm down, not forcing contact. "You picked the wrong house, pal," he said quietly. "I'm not exactly a rescue operation." The dog's eye rolled toward him. Then, with a strength that seemed impossible, the shepherd shifted his head and pressed his nose once against Logan's knuckles. Not affection, not trust. More like a message delivered by a soldier who had crawled too far to care about manners. Logan did not move for several seconds. That small touch unsettled him more than the seizure had. Pain he understood. Emergency he understood. Need he could handle if it came with instructions. But this was different. This was a living creature, half ruined, placing 1 ounce of faith into a man who had spent 3 years making sure no one needed him. The knock came 20 minutes later. Noelle Carver entered without waiting for ceremony, bringing cold air, snow, and the brisk authority of a woman who had spent half her life convincing wild places and stubborn people to cooperate. She was in her early 40s, lean and steady, her forest green ranger coat dusted white across the shoulders. Dark chestnut hair was tied low beneath a knit cap, though a few strands had escaped around her face. Her eyes, green-brown and sharp, took in the room once. Fire, blanket, dog, Logan, door, shelf, water bowl. "Move the lamp closer," she said. Logan did. Noelle knelt beside the shepherd, slow enough not to startle him. "Hey there, big man," she murmured. "That's a rough way to introduce yourself." "He was down by the bend." "Which bend?" "Below my property, west side." Her mouth tightened slightly. "Near the old runoff cut?" Logan heard the change in her voice but let it pass. "Later." Noelle worked with controlled speed. She checked the dog's gums, breathing, pulse, eyes. She spoke to a mobile vet on speaker, relaying symptoms without drama. Logan followed instructions. Towel, warm water, flashlight, space, quiet. He was good at being useful when someone else named the task. While Noelle adjusted the blanket, her fingers brushed the old leather collar half hidden in the shepherd's fur. She wiped away melted snow. A metal plate hung there, scratched nearly smooth. Only one letter could still be read clearly. R. "No full tag," Noelle said. "Just that." Logan stared at the letter. The shepherd shivered, then gave a low sound from deep in his chest. His eyes drifted again toward the door. "Remy," Logan said. Noelle glanced up. "I need to call him something." "Remy?" she asked. "Looks like a Remy. He looks like he argued with a snowbank and lost." "He looks like he survived the argument?" Noelle's expression softened for half a second. "Then Remy it is." The first night was not heroic. It was towels, phone calls, shallow breathing, and the dull tick of the clock above the stove. Noelle stayed until the vet had talked them through the first stage of care and promised to come as soon as the roads allowed. Before leaving, she stood near the door and looked back at Logan. "He cannot move around," she said. "Not tomorrow. Maybe not the next day. His body is drained. If he tries to get up, stop him." Logan looked at Remy, who lay exhausted beside the hearth. "He keeps looking toward the river." Noelle's hand paused on the doorknob. "Some dogs know where they belong," she said, "even when getting back there almost kills them." Then she left. For 2 days, Remy remained near the fire. He did not improve so much as refuse to vanish. He drank only when Logan held the bowl low and backed away. He slept in short, troubled stretches, paws twitching, ears shifting toward every sound outside. Sometimes he woke with a harsh breath and tried to lift his head. Each time his gaze went to the back door. Logan told himself it meant nothing. Dogs remembered smells, routes, fear. Maybe there was a den, maybe a former owner, maybe only pain. The world was full of unfinished things. A man could not answer all of them just because one wounded animal had dragged itself into his morning. Still, he moved his sleeping bag to the living room floor the second night. Not because he cared, because Remy might seize again. That was all. At least that was the lie Logan offered the empty room. On the third night, snow began falling harder. Not a storm yet, but a steady silver descent that made the windows glow faintly in the dark. The cabin settled around him. The fire burned low. Logan sat at the kitchen table with the brass compass in front of him, turning it slowly beneath his thumb. The needle trembled north, lost it, found it again. Near the hearth, Remy stirred. Logan looked up. The shepherd pushed one front paw beneath himself. His legs shook violently. He failed once, collapsed, breathed hard, and tried again. "Don't," Logan said. Remy ignored him. He rose halfway, ribs quivering under his black and gold coat, scarred ear tilted, eyes fixed on the back door. Each step looked stolen from pain. One paw slid on the floor. Logan moved toward him, but Remy gave a low sound, not a growl exactly, a refusal. "Remy." The dog reached the kitchen threshold and stopped. His body swayed. He turned his head toward Logan. There was no pleading in his eyes, no softness, no simple animal confusion, only direction. Logan stood in the dark kitchen, one hand holding the medicine Noelle had left for the dog, the other resting on the back door handle. Beyond it waited the frozen river, the snow, the white hush of North Haven, and somewhere downriver, whatever Remy had nearly died trying to reach. Logan had told himself he had saved a dog. That was clean. That was manageable. That ended at the hearth. But Remy stood trembling before the door like a wounded herald from some older story, carrying no crown, no prophecy, only pain and purpose. And Logan understood with a cold certainty that settled deeper than winter. This dog did not simply want to live. He wanted to go back before something else was lost. By the sixth morning, Remy could stand without falling. That did not mean he was well. His legs still trembled if he stayed upright too long, and the black saddle of fur across his back had not yet regained its shine. He moved like an old warrior after a fever, proud enough to hate being watched, weak enough to need the watching. When Logan carried the water bowl closer, Remy turned his head away as if offended by the kindness, then drank the moment Logan pretended not to look. Noelle Carver came by before sunrise, boots knocking snow from the porch, ranger coat dusted white at the shoulders. She checked Remy's gums, his pulse, the stiffness in his legs. Then she looked at Logan with the expression of a woman who already knew he was about to do something unreasonable. "He can walk to the door," she said. "Not to wherever he thinks he belongs." Logan stood by the hearth, arms folded over the olive-drab combat shirt he wore beneath his open canvas coat. The camouflage sleeves were pushed to his forearms. The brass compass on the kitchen shelf caught a line of morning light and threw it against the wall like a small, uncertain star. "He keeps trying." "So do men with cracked ribs and no sense," Noelle said. "That does not make it medical advice." Remy, lying on the rug, lifted his head at the sound of the wind against the back door. His scarred left ear tilted toward the river. That one movement changed the room. Noelle saw it. Logan saw her seeing it. "Stillwater Bend?" Logan asked. Noelle did not answer quickly. She rubbed her thumb across the edge of her orange field notebook. "You know the place." "I know where it is." "That's not what I asked." Logan looked through the window toward the white slope leading down to the Elden River. "I used to drive past it." "Most people do." That was the truth of Stillwater Bend. People drove past it. They glanced at the old cabins below the road, the silver campers tucked among pines, the chapel roof bending under snow, and they decided, without deciding, that the place belonged to another category of life. The category that could be pitied at a distance and ignored up close. Noelle crouched beside Remy. If he goes slow. 5 minutes in the cold, then back in the truck. No heroics. Logan almost smiled. You give that speech to me or the dog? Yes. An hour later, Logan's old pickup crawled down the narrow road toward Stillwater Bend. Winter had made the river valley almost painfully bright. Snow lay on the branches in soft white burdens. The Eldon moved below its broken skin of ice, dark and patient, whispering under the frozen shelves along the bank. Sunlight struck the surface in hard flashes. Beautiful, Logan thought, and then corrected himself. Dangerous things often were. Remy stood unsteadily on the passenger side floor, one paw braced against the seat, his nose lifted toward the cracked window. Logan had wrapped an old wool blanket around his body, though the dog had accepted it with visible humiliation. Every few seconds, Remy's breath fogged the glass. Every few seconds, his gaze sharpened. The road dipped. Stillwater Bend appeared below them. It was not much by any official measure. A handful of cabins leaned into the snow as if they had survived by habit. A few old trailers stood on blocks, their windows framed with frost. Smoke rose from stovepipes in thin blue lines. At the center of the settlement sat a small wooden chapel with a crooked steeple and a bell no larger than a soup pot. A string of faded Christmas lights hung across the porch of a silver camper, still glowing in late January because some stubborn soul had refused to let darkness win its argument. Logan parked beside a plowed patch near the chapel. Before he could cut the engine, Remy whined. It was not loud. It was worse than loud. It sounded like something inside the dog had recognized its own name. Easy, Logan said. He opened the door and helped Remy down. The shepherd's paws touched the snow. His legs buckled slightly, but he caught himself. Then he lifted his head. A cabin door opened. An old man in a blue flannel shirt and brown suspenders stepped out, holding a coffee mug as if it were official equipment. His white hair stuck up under a knit cap. He squinted at Remy, then at Logan. Well, the man said, voice rough as a cold engine, either I'm dead or that fool dog finally found somebody dumber than he is. Remy's tail moved once, not a wag exactly, a mark of recognition. The old man came down the steps with careful knees. Harold Tuck, he said to Logan, though he did not offer a hand because the coffee occupied the important one. If you're selling anything, I'm broke. If you're preaching anything, Glenn already has the local monopoly. If you're bringing that dog back, you can stay. I'm not bringing him back, Logan said. Harold looked at Remy leaning against Logan's leg. Dog disagrees. Across the lane, a camper door opened and a woman in a red quilted coat leaned out. She had silver hair braided over one shoulder and a dish towel tucked into her coat pocket like a flag of domestic authority. Len, she called into the camper. Remy's back. A narrow-faced man appeared behind her, taller than the doorway wanted him to be, wearing a cardigan buttoned wrong and boots unlaced at the top. You sure it's him, Ruth? The woman pointed. You know another shepherd with that crooked ear and the manners of a church deacon at a bar fight? Remy took one step toward them, then stopped, trembling. Logan bent slightly. That's enough. But people were coming out now. Slowly, suspiciously, hopefully. Old faces in doorways. A woman with an oxygen tube standing behind a storm window. A man with a cane lifting 2 fingers in greeting. Nobody rushed the dog. They seemed to understand him better than Logan did. They gave him space the way people gave space to returning grief. The chapel door creaked open. A man in his late 60s stepped onto the porch, round through the middle, silver hair combed back, a burgundy scarf wrapped around his neck. A ring of keys hung from his belt and chimed softly when he moved. He had the warm, tired eyes of someone who had spent years listening to sorrow without trying to decorate it. "Remy," he said. The dog looked toward him. The man smiled, but not too much. "Well, Lord, that is one prayer answered with muddy feet." "You Glen Avery?" Logan asked. "Pastor once. Glen is fine unless something is on fire." "Logan Pierce?" "I know. North Road cabin. Keeps to himself. Owns a truck that sounds like it has regrets." Harold grunted. "Truck does have regrets. I heard it coming." Logan might have left then if Remy had let him. Instead, the dog began moving toward the cabin closest to the river. It sat lower than the others, with a ramp cleared carefully through the snow and a faded blue curtain in the front window. Remy walked slowly, each step costing him, but he did not hesitate. Logan followed with one hand hovering near the dog's ribs, ready to catch him without admitting he was doing it. The cabin door opened before they reached the ramp. Pearl Benton sat in a wheelchair just inside the threshold, wrapped in a gray-blue cardigan and a cream shawl that had seen many winters and forgiven none of them. She was small, white-haired, sharp-eyed, with a face that looked fragile until she looked directly at a person. Then it became clear that age had thinned her body, not her will. Remy reached the bottom of the ramp and stopped. Pearl's mouth trembled once. "Well," she whispered, "there's my unpaid policeman." Remy climbed the ramp with painful dignity. Logan moved to help, but Pearl lifted one thin hand. "Let him come." So Logan stood still. The German shepherd reached her chair, lowered himself with a quiet, exhausted sigh, and placed his body beside the right wheel, head turned toward the lane. Not at Pearl, away from her. Guarding! The entire bend seemed to breathe differently. Pearl lowered her hand onto the dog's head. Her fingers sank into the rough fur between his ears. "Where did you find him?" she asked. "By the river, West Bend. He was poisoned or ate something bad." A silence moved through the people behind Logan. Not surprise, recognition trying not to show its face. Harold muttered something under his breath that sounded like a curse dressed in church clothes. Pearl's hand stilled on Remy's head. He came back anyway. Logan looked at the dog, then at the cabins, the chapel, the river pressing under ice. Back from what? No one answered, not because they did not know, because every small town had questions people survived by postponing. A white SUV came down the road before anyone could speak. It was too clean for Stillwater Bend, its tires shining with wet slush, its side marked with a logo of a green river curling around a silver leaf. Veer Development. Noelle had arrived behind Logan in her own Ranger truck, and now she stepped out, her face tightening as the SUV stopped near Pearl's cabin. She wore her official coat, but something in her posture said the coat did not give her as much power as it should have. A man in a black parka climbed from the SUV carrying a clipboard and a roll of bright orange notices. He was young enough to still believe a logo could protect him from consequence, old enough to enjoy being the one with papers. His hair was gelled too neatly for the wind. "Morning," he called, smiling as if everyone had agreed to this. "I'm here on behalf of Veer Development and Clearwater Civic Assessment." Ruth Mallory crossed her arms. "No one invited either of you?" "Ma'am, this is a routine environmental compliance posting." Pearl's fingers tightened in Remy's fur. Noelle moved forward. "On whose authorization?" The man's smile thinned when he recognized her. "Ranger Carver, my understanding is you've been advised not to interfere with civil compliance procedures." A small change passed through Noelle's face. Not fear. Restraint sharpened until it hurt. Logan saw it and understood more than he wanted to. The papers mattered. The words mattered. Men like this did not need guns if they arrived with the right letterhead. The man walked toward Pearl's door. Remy rose. It was not graceful. His legs shook. The blanket slid from his back into the snow, but he stood between the man and Pearl's wheelchair, head low, tail still, amber-brown eyes fixed on the clipboard as if paper could bleed. "Control your dog," the man said. Logan stepped forward, but Pearl spoke first. "He is controlled. Ma'am, I need to post this notice. Then post it on your own forehead and walk around town. We'll all read it eventually." Harold made a sound like a cough losing a fight with laughter. The man's face flushed. "This property has been identified as part of an active contamination concern. Refusal to cooperate may affect relocation eligibility." There it was, Logan thought, a velvet glove with brass knuckles inside. Noelle's voice stayed level. "You cannot threaten relocation terms in a field posting. I'm informing her of potential outcomes. You're leaning on a woman in a wheelchair in 30-degree weather." The man looked at Logan, perhaps hoping for another authority, perhaps finding only a tall, clean-shaven man with silver at his temples, a combat shirt under his coat, and eyes that had gone very still. Logan did not raise his voice. "Put the notice on the post," he said. The man blinked. "Excuse me?" "The porch post, not her door, not over her handle where she has to reach it. Post it where she can read it without you crowding her chair." For a moment the young man looked as if he might argue. Then he looked at Remy. The shepherd had not moved. That seemed to bother him more than a growl would have. He stapled the orange notice to the porch post. The sound cracked through the cold. When he left, his SUV threw slush against the edge of the lane. No one spoke until it disappeared over the rise. Then Harold said, "I liked him better before I met him." "He's just the paper boy," Ruth said. "It's the man writing the paper I'm worried about." Logan read the notice from where he stood. Environmental violation, temporary hazard designation, recommended voluntary relocation pending review, Clearwater civic assessment, Elden River Renewal Park. Pretty words? Clean words. Words that knew how to make removal sound like rescue. Noelle stood beside him, jaw tight. "Conrad Veer wants this land," she said quietly. "For a park on paper, trails, river access, restoration. But the private proposal includes winter cabins, paid parking, guided ice fishing packages, and a marina once the southern bend is dredged. He can't sell rustic peace with people like Pearl still living in it." "People like Pearl," Logan repeated. Noelle heard the edge in his voice. "That's his thinking, not mine." From the porch, Pearl gave a dry laugh. "Don't worry, Ranger. I've been called worse by better men." Glenn Avery stepped down from the chapel porch, keys chiming softly at his belt. "And by worse men with better shoes." Pearl looked at Logan then. Her hand rested on Remy's head, and Remy leaned against her wheelchair as if his weakened body had found the one duty it could still perform. "He slept under the chapel porch most nights," she said. "Walked Ruth home when the ice got bad. Sat with Len when his heart acted up. Growled at Harold's generator, which showed good judgment. He never belonged to one of us." Her fingers moved gently over the scarred ear. "He belonged to all of us?" Logan wanted to step back from the feeling rising in him. He had only brought back a dog. A sick dog. A temporary problem. That was the shape he had given it, because temporary things could be survived without changing a man's life. But Stillwater Bend stood around him in its patched coats and worn boots, with smoke rising from crooked chimneys and Christmas lights glowing stubbornly in daylight. These were not helpless people. They were people being named as waste because someone wealthier wanted cleaner scenery. Remy shifted, pressing closer to Pearl's chair. Logan looked down at him. "You knew where you were going?" Pearl's eyes stayed on the dog, but her words were for Logan. "He didn't come back because he needed saving, Mr. Pierce." The wind moved lightly along the river, carrying the smell of snow, wood smoke, and something faintly metallic from the thawing bank. Pearl looked up at Logan then, and age did not make her small. He came back because he hadn't given up on us. Logan Pierce did not decide to keep returning to Stillwater Bend. That would have made it sound noble, and he distrusted noble explanations. Noble men got themselves killed with clean sentences. He told himself he came back because Remy needed short, careful walks. Because Noelle had asked him to watch for signs of weakness. Because Pearl Benton's ramp had a loose board that could catch the wheel of her chair. Because Harold Tuck's generator coughed like a dying bear, and Logan knew enough about engines to hate the sound. There were always reasons, if a man needed them. By the second week after Remy's return, Logan had begun leaving his cabin before breakfast, the old pickup rolling down the frozen road with Remy lying across the passenger side on a folded blanket. The dog had gained some strength, but not enough to look whole. His ribs no longer stood out like warnings, yet his movements still held the careful thrift of a body that remembered pain. When he jumped down from the truck, Logan pretended not to hover. Remy pretended not to notice. Stillwater Bend greeted winter differently than Logan's cabin did. At his place, snow meant silence. Here, snow meant work. Ruth Mallory swept her camper steps with the fury of a woman conducting battle against weather itself. Len followed behind, carrying a small bucket of salt and offering advice she did not request. Harold Tuck leaned over a half-open generator with a yellow-handled screwdriver between his teeth, muttering that machines had no gratitude and less upbringing. Pastor Glenn Avery shoveled the chapel walk in slow, stubborn lines, keys chiming against his coat with each step. Pearl watched all of it from her cabin window, and Remy watched the river. That was the first thing Logan noticed. The dog did not simply enjoy being back. He patrolled, though his body could not afford much of it. He would lie beside Pearl's wheelchair for 20 minutes, then lift his head toward the lower bank. Sometimes he stood at the edge of the chapel yard and stared at a strip of ice where the snow had turned gray-green instead of white. Other times he sniffed at the frozen ditch beside the lane and backed away, not frightened exactly, but alert in a way Logan had learned to respect. Men lied. Ground rarely did. By the third morning, Logan began looking closer. A black trash bag sat half-buried behind a snowbank near the old bait shed. It did not belong there. Stillwater people reused everything until it surrendered. They did not leave new contractor grade bags out in the open. When Logan tore a small corner with his knife, he found oily rags and broken plastic tubing inside. Near the lower culvert, a slick rainbow sheen floated beneath a skin of melting ice, too faint to alarm someone passing by, too deliberate-looking for Logan to ignore. On the narrow trail Remy used to take toward the river, Logan found a rusted foothold trap hidden beneath loose snow and dead grass. It had not sprung. Its jaws waited open with a dumb patience that made Logan's jaw tighten. He used a branch to close it, then carried it back to Harold. The old mechanic looked at it, spat into the snow, and said, "That ain't for raccoons." "No." "Somebody setting these around here?" "Looks that way." Harold's weather-cut face folded deeper. "Remy used to run that trail every night." Logan looked toward the chapel yard, where the shepherd lay beside Pearl's chair, with his scarred ear tilted toward the river. Harold wiped his hands on a rag that had already lost every argument with grease. "You going to ask me who did it?" "You going to answer?" "Nope." "Then no." Harold grunted, as if pleased to have found another man willing to save time. But silence did not mean ignorance. It hung over Stillwater Bend in strips and patches, like the torn blue tarps over winter firewood. Logan saw the man twice before speaking to him. The first time, the man stood near the fence line above the lower bend, wearing a black security jacket with the small Veer Development logo stitched near the chest. He was lean, hollow-cheeked, maybe early 40s, with a burnt orange knit cap pulled low and a cigarette unlit between two fingers. He watched the cabins as if guarding them from their own existence. The second time he was by the river access road, kicking snow over tire tracks. Remy saw him then. The dog went completely still. No bark, no growl, only stillness, tail low, head level, eyes fixed on the man until the man looked away first. Logan walked toward him. The security guard stiffened when he saw Logan coming. He had a face built from bad sleep and unpaid bills. Stubble shadowed his jaw. His boots were cheap and wet at the seams. "Private worksite up that way," the man said before Logan reached him. "I'm not up that way." "You're looking." "Free country." The man gave a short laugh with no humor in it. "Not around here lately." Logan studied him. "Name?" The man's eyes dropped to his own boots. "Dale Rusk." "Logan Pierce." "I know who you are." That was interesting. "Then you know I'm not here for your fence." Dale's hand moved inside his jacket pocket and came out with a blue plastic lighter. He rolled it once, twice, though he did not light anything. "You should keep that dog away from the lower bend." "Why?" "Bad ground." "Bad how?" Dale looked toward Remy, then toward the cabins, then away again. "Just bad. Someone set a trap near the trail." Dale's thumb stopped on the lighter wheel. Logan waited. In the cold, some men rushed to fill silence. Dale seemed more likely to drown in it. "Coyotes," Dale said finally. "That trap wasn't placed for coyotes." "I don't know about traps." "You looked down when you said that." Dale's face tightened. "You some kind of cop?" "No." "Then stop talking like one." He walked away before Logan could answer, shoulders hunched against more than wind. Logan did not follow. Old Logan might have. The part of him that still wanted a direct line from threat to target had risen up for a moment, clean and eager. But Remy was watching him from near Pearl's ramp, and the dog's worn body seemed to ask a harder thing of him than pursuit. Stay. Listen. Let the shape reveal itself. That afternoon, Conrad Veer came to Stillwater Bend. He arrived in a charcoal SUV, tires quiet, windows clean, a vehicle that seemed designed to make Mud feel embarrassed. He stepped out wearing a gray wool coat, navy scarf, black gloves, and polished boots with just enough tread to pretend he respected winter. His hair was dark blonde, threaded with silver, combed back neatly. He had one of those public smiles that did not begin in the mouth so much as arrive fully assembled. Ruth saw him first and said, "Well, there's a catalog man." Len squinted. "What catalog?" "The kind that sells things nobody needs to people who already have too much." Conrad approached Pearl's cabin as though he had been expected. Logan was on the porch, tightening the loose ramp board. Remy lay beside Pearl's chair, head lifted but silent. "Mr. Pierce," Conrad said warmly. "I was hoping we might meet under less tense circumstances." Logan turned the screw once more before standing. "Were you?" Conrad's smile remained. "I understand you've been helping Mrs. Benton. That speaks well of you." Pearl, from her chair, said, "Careful. He'll make kindness sound like a permit application." Conrad gave her a patient look. "Pearl, I know you distrust me." "I trust you plenty." "That so?" "I trust you to want what you want." For the first time, the smile thinned. Conrad looked back to Logan. Stillwater Bend has become symbolic in ways that aren't useful to the people living here. The cabins are unsafe. The riverbank is unstable. There are contamination concerns. My proposal gives these residents a cleaner, safer future. "Where?" Logan asked. "There are assisted housing options in North Haven and county-supported relocation packages." Pearl laughed softly. "A room by the highway and a view of the pharmacy sign. Paradise with fluorescent lighting." No one is trying to erase anyone, Conrad said. Logan glanced around at the orange notice still stapled to Pearl's porch post, the tire tracks above the lower road, the strange trash bag now sitting in the back of his truck. Funny way of not erasing. Conrad's eyes moved over Logan's combat shirt, the faded camouflage sleeves, the clean-shaven jaw, the stillness that had begun settling into the air between them. "I respect service," Conrad said. "Truly, but men trained to handle conflict sometimes see it where negotiation would serve better." That was well aimed, not loud, not foolish. A knife with a napkin wrapped around the handle. Logan felt his hand close once, then open. Remy slowly rose. The dog did not step forward. He simply stood beside Pearl's chair and fixed his eyes on Conrad's polished boots. Conrad looked down at him. "That dog should be evaluated. If he's been roaming the river corridor, he may have been exposed to hazardous material. For everyone's safety." Pearl's hand moved to Remy's neck. "He has better manners than most visitors." "And yet," Conrad said gently, "attachment can make practical decisions harder." Logan stepped off the porch. This time he allowed one step. Only one. "Mr. Veer," he said, voice quiet, "you ever notice how often men say practical when they mean profitable?" The cold took the sentence and carried it across the yard. Harold stopped working on the generator. Ruth went still at her camper door. Even the river seemed to lower its voice beneath the ice. Conrad's smile did not vanish. It became smaller, almost delicate. "I hope you'll come to see the broader good," he said. "North Haven deserves restoration." Then he turned, brushed a few harmless flakes from his sleeve, and walked back to the SUV. After he left, Logan found Noelle waiting near the chapel. She had seen enough. Her face showed none of it until they stepped inside the little building, out of the wind. The chapel smelled of old wood, cold hymnals, and the faint waxy sweetness of candles stored too long in a drawer. Noelle spread a waterproof map across a table in the back room and set her orange notebook beside it. "I can show you what's public," she said. "Not internal reports, not open case files, public data, weather records, published survey lines, old drainage maps. Show me what won't get you fired." That list is getting shorter. The maps were not dramatic. Lines, dates, elevations, water routes. Most people would have seen nothing but ink. Logan saw movement. Winter runoff from the higher industrial parcels should have tracked northeast, then cut toward the old mill channel. Stillwater Bend sat low, but not in the right line to create the contamination Clearwater had named. Noelle tapped one blue mark. They sampled here after a warm day when meltwater pooled from the service road. Not from the cabins. No. Bad science? Maybe, or convenient science. She introduced Dr. Amos Klein 2 hours later at a diner on the edge of North Haven, where the coffee was bitter enough to qualify as a warning. Amos arrived late, carrying a plastic map tube under one arm and a takeout box of waffles under the other. He was short, white-haired, red-nosed from cold, with wire-rimmed glasses sliding down his face and a pencil tucked behind one ear. He looked at Logan, then at Noelle, then at Remy, lying under the table, with his head on his paws. "That the river dog?" "Remy," Noelle said. Dog has sense. More than most committees." He ate while reading the maps, which seemed to be part of his method. Twice he stopped chewing entirely and narrowed his eyes at a contour line. Once he muttered, "Idiots," with such tenderness that Logan suspected it was his favorite technical term. Finally, Amos tapped the paper with a syrup-stained finger. "If this is the sample point they're using to blame Stillwater, then either water has learned to climb uphill in its spare time, or somebody took the easy story and dressed it in numbers." Noelle leaned back. "Can you put that in writing?" "I can put it in writing with fewer insults." "Please do." I said fewer. Logan looked down at Remy. The dog's eyes were closed, but one ear remained tilted toward the conversation. That evening, Pearl invited Logan inside her cabin for the first time. It was small, warm, crowded with the evidence of a full life, reduced carefully, but not surrendered. Quilts folded on a cedar chest, a radio on the windowsill, a photograph of a broad-shouldered man in a county maintenance jacket standing beside Pearl when her hair had still been dark. On a shelf near the stove sat a small wooden sewing box, polished at the corners by years of use. Remy settled beside Pearl's chair, as always, facing the door. Pearl noticed Logan looking at the photograph. "Wes," she said, "my husband. He knew every drain, pipe, culvert, and forgotten ditch in this county. Said water was the only honest witness because it always told you where it had been." Logan remained standing until Pearl pointed at a chair. "Sit down, Mr. Pierce. You loom like bad weather." He sat. Pearl rolled closer to the shelf and took down the sewing box. Her hands were thin but steady. She opened the lid. Inside were spools of thread, needles tucked into felt, buttons in a baby food jar, and beneath them, wrapped in faded blue cloth, a folded paper worn soft along the creases. "I gave a copy of this to a county man 2 years ago," she said. He smiled like I was a child showing him a leaf. Then it disappeared. She placed the folded paper on Logan's knees. "I kept the original because Wes told me once that if a man laughs at proof, he is either a fool or afraid of it." Logan unfolded it carefully. The map was hand-drawn over an old printed survey, marked with Wes Benton's small block handwriting. Drainage lines, old industrial outflow routes, a buried pipe beneath the parcel, now marked for Veer's renewal project, arrows showing winter runoff, spring overflow, and a red circle junction near the lower bend. Noelle, standing by the stove, went very quiet. Pearl looked at the map as if it were both relic and wound. "Wes found that line after the mill shut down. Said it should have been capped properly, said if anyone built over it, they'd make a mess and blame gravity. Amos had said water did not climb uphill. Wes Benton had drawn where it did go. Logan felt the pieces shift, not into a full answer, not yet, but into a shape large enough to cast a shadow. "This won't be enough by itself," Noelle said softly. Pearl nodded. "I know. We'd need current samples, photographs, supporting records." "I know. Maybe testimony from someone who saw what Veer's crews have been doing." Pearl's mouth tightened. "I know that too." Logan folded the paper back along its old lines. For reasons he did not understand, he thought of his father's brass compass, wavering in cold weather but still trying to find north. The map was not justice. It was direction. Later, they carried it to the chapel because Pearl wanted a larger table, and Glenn had the key. Snow had begun again, falling beyond the small windows in slow white curtains. Pastor Glenn lit 2 lamps near the altar and did not ask questions he had not earned the right to ask. Noelle spread the map on the wooden table. Logan placed Amos's notes beside it. Pearl sat with Remy at her right wheel, her hand resting between his ears. The little chapel held the silence differently than Logan's cabin. His silence had been empty. This one was waiting. Outside, the river moved under ice. Inside, Wes Benton's lines crossed the table in faded ink, stubborn as roots. Pearl looked down at them, then at Logan. "My husband is gone," she said, "but he was never careless. If he drew a line, he had walked it, measured it, cursed it, and probably fallen in it once." Glenn gave a quiet smile. "That sounds like Wes." Pearl's hand tightened gently in Remy's fur. "He's dead," she whispered, "and somehow he's still trying to show us the way out." The map changed Logan Pierce in a way he did not like. It did not make him hopeful. Hope was too soft a word, too clean around the edges. What the map gave him was direction, and direction was more dangerous. A hopeless man could sit still. A man with direction started sharpening himself against the nearest wrong. For 2 nights after Pearl Benton unfolded Wes's old drainage map in the chapel, Logan slept badly. Not the usual bad sleep, not the deep black drop into memory, where voices came back from places he had trained himself not to name. This was a waking sleep, thin and restless, filled with lines on paper. Old industrial outflow, buried pipe, winter runoff, lower bend, veer parcel. His mind kept laying the map over the riverbank, over the strange sheen under the ice, over the trash bag of oily rags in the back of his truck, over Dale Rusk's eyes dropping toward his boots. At 3 in the morning, Logan stood in his kitchen with the lights off, one hand on his father's brass compass, the other on the folded copy of the map Noelle had made. Remy lay near the hearth, asleep but uneasy, one scarred ear twitching toward the smallest movements. The dog's breath had steadied over the past few days, though weakness still lived in him like a winter tenant refusing eviction. Logan looked toward the back door. Beyond it were the woods, the road, the river, the lock gates around Veer's auxiliary yard. If he left now, he could reach the place before dawn. He could cut wide through the pines, avoid the main camera on the service road, find the lower drainage line, photograph whatever Conrad had hidden beneath his clean words. He knew how to move unseen. That was the problem. A skill did not care whether the man using it was wise. He had his field jacket on before he admitted he had made the decision. Charcoal green, water-resistant, dark enough for tree shadow. He clipped a flashlight inside the left pocket, tucked his phone against his chest to preserve the battery, and folded the map into an inner sleeve. His old combat shirt fit close beneath the jacket, olive drab body, camouflage sleeves, the dark bands across his biceps half hidden. He told himself it was reconnaissance. That word had carried men into worse ideas than this. Remy lifted his head. "No," Logan said quietly. The dog watched him. "I'll be back before light." Remy tried to rise. "Don't." But the shepherd did not understand orders the way men did, or maybe he understood too well and rejected the bad ones. He pushed himself up on trembling legs, stepped once toward Logan, and nearly went down. His paws scraped the wood floor. His shoulder hit the side of the chair. A sharp breath left him, not a yelp, not quite, but a sound so controlled it was worse. Logan moved before thought. He caught Remy under the chest, lowering him back to the rug. The dog's body shook beneath his hands. Not from poison now, not only. From effort, from pain, from the desperate conviction that if Logan went out into the dark, something that belonged to Remy's world might be lost again. "Idiot dog," Logan whispered. Remy's amber-brown eyes met his. Logan froze there, kneeling in the dim kitchen, one hand against the dog's ribs, the other still gripping the flashlight he had meant to carry into Conrad Veer's land. The shame came clean and sudden. He had almost done it again, not because Stillwater needed it, not because Noelle had asked, not because Pearl's map demanded it, because some buried part of him still believed the only honest use for a broken man was to spend him. He sat back slowly. The house was quiet, but no longer empty. Remy lay before him, breathing hard, exhausted by the effort of stopping him. Logan unclipped the flashlight and set it on the table. Then he took off the field jacket. By morning, he had not slept at all. Noelle arrived at 7, found him on the porch with coffee gone cold in his hand, and did not waste time asking if he was fine. She had the look of a woman who considered that question an insult to evidence. "You went?" she asked. "No." "You almost went." Logan looked at her. "You tracking me now?" "You have the face." "Everyone keeps saying that." "Then consider changing faces." She stepped past him into the cabin. Remy lay by the hearth, watching both of them with tired disapproval. Noelle crouched, checked his breathing and legs, then looked back at Logan. "He tried to follow you." Logan said nothing. "That dog is still recovering. He does not need a midnight raid because you miss having orders." The words hit harder because she did not raise her voice. Logan's jaw tightened. "You don't know what I miss." "No," Noelle said. "I know what Conrad will do if you trespass. He'll call the sheriff, the county board, maybe a reporter if he can get one to answer before breakfast. He'll say a decorated former Navy SEAL, living alone and emotionally unstable, threatened his lawful environmental redevelopment site." Logan looked away. "And then," she continued, "he'll use you to bury Pearl's map, my field notes, Amos's analysis, and every person in Stillwater who still has something to lose." The fire popped softly. Logan hated how exactly she had placed the shot. Noelle stood, brushing dog hair from her glove. Truth cannot be rescued by a beautiful mistake. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "That's something they teach in Ranger School?" "No, that's something women learn when angry men keep mistaking impulse for courage." He deserved that, which made it harder to hear. Her phone buzzed before he could answer. She looked at the screen and went still. "Captain Morrow," she said under her breath, then answered. Logan could hear only Noelle's side, but the conversation wrote itself in her posture. "Yes, ma'am. No, I have not entered private property. I understand. Public data only. I am aware of the complaint. No, ma'am, I am not making this personal." Her mouth flattened, because the drainage pattern matters whether or not the complainant has a lawyer. Silence. "Yes, ma'am." When she ended the call, she stood a moment with the phone in her hand. "Elaine?" Logan asked. "Captain Elaine Morrow, my supervisor. She has the emotional range of a locked filing cabinet and the survival instincts of a fox." "Sounds useful." "She just reminded me that if I take one wrong step, the department may have to distance itself from my actions." "Stop." "You think she's protecting herself?" Noelle looked out the window toward the river. "I think she's protecting the department. I think she's protecting procedure. I think sometimes those things overlap with justice, and sometimes they stand in front of it wearing a clean badge." That afternoon, Pearl Benton summoned Logan. No one said summoned. Ruth Mallory came to the chapel steps, wiped her hands on her apron, and said, "Pearl says if you're done being dramatic, she has coffee." Logan looked at Noelle. Noelle lifted both eyebrows. "I'd go. She has wheels and still outranks you." Pearl's cabin smelled of cinnamon toast, old paper, wood smoke, and the faint medicinal sharpness of liniment. Remy settled at the right wheel of her chair as if reporting for duty. Logan stood by the stove until Pearl pointed to the chair opposite her. "Sit, Mr. Pierce." He sat. Pearl poured coffee from a thermos into two mismatched mugs. Hers had a faded loon on it. His said, "World's okayest uncle," which felt like an accusation from a family he had never met. "You were going to do something foolish," she said. Logan looked into the coffee. "Noelle talked to you?" "Noelle didn't need to. You came in here walking like a man rehearsing his funeral." The words found the room's softest place and cut there. Pearl watched him over the rim of her mug. Her hair was pinned low, white as frost, and her blue eyes were not kind enough to let him hide. "My husband was like that at the end," she said. "Not with war, with work. He thought if he could just carry one more thing, fix one more pipe, prove one more truth, then maybe the world would forgive him for not being able to fix everything." Logan's fingers tightened around the mug. Pearl continued more quietly. "Do you know what happens to people who love men like that?" He did know. Maren standing in the kitchen with her suitcase. Maren saying, "You came home, but you never came back. Marin waiting year after year for him to stop treating survival like a debt. "They get tired," Pearl said. "Then they get blamed for leaving the room before the roof falls." Logan closed his eyes. The cabin clock ticked in the corner. Pearl set her mug down. "You don't protect us if you're only looking for another place to die." Outside, a crow called from the pine line, harsh and ordinary. Logan opened his eyes. Remy had placed his head on Pearl's footrest, but his gaze was on Logan, not pleading, not accusing, simply present, which was becoming the dog's most unfair weapon. Logan breathed once, slowly. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. Pearl's face did not soften much, but something in her shoulders eased. "I want you to stop being the only man in your own army." By evening, the chapel had become a planning room. Not officially. Official things needed forms, and Glenn Avery said the Lord had managed loaves and fishes without a county permit, but he still checked the exits twice. The little wooden building glowed under 2 lamps. Snow tapped against the windows. The bell above the porch shifted faintly in the wind. Logan spread paper across the central table. Not the drainage map this time. A list, names, cabins, mobility issues, medication needs, pets, vehicles, radios, oxygen tanks, firewood, generators, high ground routes, people who could drive at night, people who could not be trusted to say when they were dizzy. That last category was long enough to make Ruth snort. "This is not an evacuation order," Logan said. Harold Tuck leaned back in a folding chair, yellow screwdriver in his shirt pocket. "Good. I don't take orders from men whose truck sounds worse than my generator." "Your generator sounds like it's haunted by a lawnmower." "It has character." "It has carbon buildup." Harold looked offended. "You watch your mouth in church." Ruth Mallory marked medicine bags with colored tape while Len held the flashlight and tried not to shine it in her eyes. "Red for heart pills," Ruth said. "Blue for breathing, yellow for pain, green for things nobody admits taking until they run out." Len nodded solemnly. "Marriage has trained me not to ask follow-up questions." Pastor Glenn stood near the stove, sorting keys onto labeled hooks. "Chapel basement, pantry, side shed, old office, bell rope closet?" "Why does a bell rope need a closet?" Noelle asked. Glenn considered this. "Because Methodists fear clutter." For the first time all day, Logan almost laughed. Not fully. Not yet. But the shape of it moved through him and did not feel like betrayal. Noelle pinned a public topographic map to a corkboard. "If water rises at the lower bend, the road by Pearl's cabin goes first. The old logging track north of the chapel stays passable longer, but only with chains. We need to know which vehicles can handle it." "Mine," Logan said. "Mine," Ruth added. Len looked at her. "Our camper barely likes turning left." "Truck, Leonard, not camper." "Oh, then yes, the truck remains in a committed relationship with gravity." The door opened near 8, letting in cold air and Tessa Ward. She was not what Logan expected when Noelle said the town librarian could help. Tessa was 45, small-framed, with dark hair cut to her jaw and silver at one temple, wearing a long charcoal coat and snow boots that had clearly been bought for practicality rather than admiration. She carried 2 canvas bags full of folders and had the calm, dangerous expression of a woman who knew exactly where every old embarrassment had been filed. "I brought building permits," she said, setting one bag on the table. "Historic drainage photographs, mill closure records, and 3 county maps that were misfiled under recreation brochures because apparently civilization is a rumor." Harold squinted at her. "You always talk like that?" Tessa looked at him. "Only when restraining myself." Logan liked her immediately. She laid out black and white photographs of the old mill service roads, drainage cuts, culvert placements, and a 1978 survey showing a pipe route near the parcel Conrad now controlled. No single document proved everything. but together they formed a skeleton beneath the snow. Amos Klein sent notes by email because, according to Noelle, he had refused to attend any meeting where people might use the word synergy near coffee. His annotations were precise, cranky, and useful. As the group worked, Remy slept near Pearl's chair. Once, the dog twitched in a dream, and Pearl lowered her hand onto his shoulder without looking. The movement was so natural, it caught Logan off guard. This was not a unit, not in the way he had known units. No one moved in formation. Half of them argued about tape colors. Harold insulted equipment as a spiritual practice. Glenn misplaced his glasses on top of his head. Ruth threatened to label Len if he stood still too long. And yet the room had begun to organize itself around care. Not panic. Care. Logan looked at the list under his palm and understood something he had missed for years. A mission did not have to be a blade. It could be a table, a pencil, a woman in a wheelchair remembering what her husband knew. A dog too weak to run, but still strong enough to stay. The next day, Conrad increased the pressure. Photos appeared on a North Haven community page. Sagging cabin roofs, a rusted barrel behind the bait shed, muddy runoff near the lower bank. The captions were careful, anonymous, and cruel. How long will the county ignore the Elden River hazard? What about public safety? Renewal means hard choices. No people appeared in the pictures. That was the trick. Without Pearl's hands, Harold's tools, Ruth's lights, Glenn's chapel keys, the place looked abandoned, ugly, guilty. Stillwater Bend had been stripped of its faces and presented as a mess. Noelle saw the posts and swore under her breath. "They're building public permission," she said. "For removal? For whatever comes next." Logan watched Dale Rusk at the edge of the Veer access road that afternoon. The security guard stood with his orange cap pulled low, blue lighter rolling between his fingers. He saw Remy beside Logan and looked away so fast it was almost confession. Remy did not bark. He only stood very still. That night, wet snow began falling, not the clean powder of earlier winter. This snow came heavy and mean, sticking to branches, weighing down wires, softening the hard crust on the ground. The river sounded louder under its ice. The chapel remained lit after everyone left. Logan stayed to lock up with Glenn. Pearl had gone home with Ruth. Harold had taken the old pump apart and declared it not dead, only morally disappointing. Tessa had carried half the county archive back to her car in banker boxes. Noelle had left to answer another call from Captain Morrow. Remy refused to leave the chapel porch. He stood at the top step, black and gold coat slowly gathering white, scarred ear lifted toward the dark line of trees across the river. His body was tired. Logan could see it in the slight tremor of his back legs. Still, the dog faced the direction of Veer's land and held his ground. "Come on," Logan said. Remy did not move. Glenn paused beside Logan, keys in hand. Sometimes a creature knows the shape of a threat before the rest of us find language for it. Logan looked at the dog, then across the river, where no lights showed beyond the trees, but the darkness felt occupied. "Or he's stubborn," Glenn smiled faintly. "Often the Lord works with available materials." Logan stepped onto the porch and stood beside Remy instead of pulling him away. Wet snow gathered on his shoulders, on the olive collar of his combat shirt, on the silver edges of his undercut hair. Across the river lay Conrad's clean promises, Dale's silence, the old pipelines, and whatever still waited beneath the thawing ground. For once, Logan did not reach for the fight. He stood watch, and in that stillness he understood that protecting Stillwater would not mean breaking himself against the first locked gate. It would mean remaining clear-eyed long enough to keep his pain from choosing the road. The thaw came too bright. That was what Ruth Mallory said first, standing outside her silver camper with one hand on her hip and the other holding a mug of coffee gone cold. The sky over North Haven had opened into a pale, shining blue, the kind tourists loved because it made snow look innocent. Sunlight glittered along the roof lines of Stillwater Bend. Icicles dripped from porch beams. The river flashed beneath its broken skin of ice, beautiful enough to fool a stranger. Ruth did not look fooled. "Winter's smiling too much," she said. "I don't trust it." Len Mallory, who was scattering salt near their steps, looked up from beneath his wool cap. "You don't trust weather, machines, politicians, or canned peaches." "Canned peaches know what they did." Logan Pierce stood near Pearl Benton's ramp with his hands in the pockets of his canvas coat, watching meltwater run in small silver threads across the frozen lane. Beneath his coat, the olive-drab combat shirt clung close against his shoulders, camouflage sleeves visible at the wrists. He had dressed for work before knowing what kind of work the day would demand. Remy stood beside Pearl's wheelchair, not leaning as much now, though weakness still showed in the careful way he placed his paws. His black and gold coat had thickened again, but the scar on his left ear and the slight hollowness at his flank kept him from looking healed. He watched the river with the fixed attention of a guard who did not like what he heard. The ice was talking, not cracking sharply. Not yet. It made low sounds under the bank, a shifting groan, then a hollow knock from somewhere beneath the snow shelf. Harold Tuck came down from the chapel with his yellow-handled screwdriver in his shirt pocket, and his expression turned sour. "Ben's warming from underneath," he said. Logan looked at him. "You can hear that?" "I can hear a bad bearing in a snowblower through a closed garage. River's louder than that." Noelle Carver arrived before noon in her Ranger truck, tires spraying slush. She stepped out with her orange field notebook tucked under one arm and her phone already open to the weather. Her forest green coat was unzipped at the throat, despite the cold, a sign she had come fast and angry. "Warm rain tonight," she said. "South wind after dark. Temperature stays above freezing until morning." Harold stared at the river. "That's a mean recipe." "It gets worse," Noelle said. Amos called. "If the snowpack releases fast, the lower bend gets boxed in. River on one side, old drainage trench on the other. Low road underwater first." Pearl listened from her chair, shawl tucked around her narrow shoulders. Her blue eyes moved toward the chapel, then to the river, then to Remy. "Wes used to say the river never forgot an old path," she said. "It only waited for weather careless enough to open the door." No one laughed. By afternoon, the brightness had become unpleasant. Snow slumped from roofs in heavy sheets. The lane softened underfoot. Water slid beneath the crust and made the ground feel false, as if the whole settlement were resting on a tablecloth someone had begun pulling away. Then Conrad Veer used the thaw. The notice came first through Noelle's phone, then through Glenn Avery's old radio, then through a county message posted online in language so polished it almost gleamed. Emergency review. Public safety concern. Potential contamination migration. Voluntary relocation strongly recommended. Permanent removal to be considered pending county assessment. At the bottom, attached like a clean white flag, was a summary from Clearwater Civic Assessment. Noelle read it twice in the chapel, jaw set so hard it looked painful. "They're saying Stillwater runoff may spread contaminants into the lower Eldon during thaw," she said. Ruth put down the roll of tape she had been using to mark medication bags. "But Amos said—" "I know what Amos said." "Then say that louder." "I cannot override a county notice with a retired hydrologist's email and a prayer." Pastor Glenn, sorting keys near the stove, lifted one hand slightly. "The prayer is available, for the record." Noelle did not smile. "Noted." Logan stood by the table, reading the notice over her shoulder. Conrad pushed this. "Yes?" "Can the county order them out tonight?" "Not cleanly. not without emergency conditions on site, but they can scare people into leaving, and once they leave, getting back becomes a paperwork swamp. Pearl sat very still. Remy's nose lifted toward the window. The chapel door opened, and Tessa Ward stepped in carrying a folder under her coat to keep it dry. Wet curls clung to her cheek. She looked more annoyed than cold. "Mason Drell won't answer," she said. Noelle looked up. "You called him." "I called Clearwater's public line, then the office line, then the number he forgot he gave the Historical Society when he requested old survey images last summer." Harold stared at her. "You librarians scare me." "Good," Tessa said. "We're underfunded, not harmless." She set the folder down. Drell signed the sampling addendum. He knows where they took the water. If he thought their conclusion was solid, he'd be talking. He is not talking. Logan looked toward the notice again. Clearwater's neat words sat on the page with all the warmth of a winter grave marker. Outside, Remy began to whine, not loudly, not theatrically. It rose from him thin and low, a sound Logan had not heard since the first night by the hearth. The dog moved toward the chapel door. "Remy," Pearl said. He stopped, but only for her voice. His body angled toward the lane, then toward Pearl's cabin, then toward the river path. Noelle watched closely. "What is he doing?" Logan took his coat from the chair. "Remembering." Remy did not lead them to evidence like a trick dog in a county fair. He did not bark at a hidden pipe or scratch a secret mark in the snow. He moved through Stillwater Bend the way a body moved through an old wound. First to Pearl's ramp, where he paused and pressed his nose to the lower board. Then toward the chapel porch, where he had slept for months before Logan knew his name. Then down the lane toward the river trail. Logan, Noelle, and Pearl followed as far as Pearl's chair could manage before the slush thickened. Ruth came behind with a blanket over one arm. Harold trailed them with a crowbar because, as he said, no emergency is improved by leaving leverage indoors. Remy stopped before a narrow strip of bank where the snow had caved in slightly. He would not step onto it. His ears flattened. His breath came faster. The wind shifted from across the river, carrying a faint smell of oil, wet earth, and something chemical beneath the clean melt. Noelle crouched near the edge, but did not cross it. "This is where you found him?" she asked. "Close," Logan said. West Bend was farther down, but he was looking this way. Remy backed once, then turned toward Pearl. The dog's eyes fixed on the old woman's lap, where her hands had begun to tremble. Pearl noticed Logan looking. "My box," she said. "What?" "My sewing box, the map, Wes's photographs. I left the photographs behind this morning." Noelle stood. "Pearl, we can get them." Pearl's face tightened with the old fear of being dismissed kindly. "Not if they tell us to leave first, not if someone locks the cabin, not if the river gets there before we do." The thawing bank gave a soft slump behind them. A shelf of snow fell into the water with a wet sound. That small collapse changed the day. Not because it was dramatic, because everyone heard the clock inside it. Logan looked at Noelle. Noelle looked toward the low road. Harold had stopped making jokes. "We start moving now," Logan said. Noelle did not argue. "Temporary relocation, safety only. We document who leaves, what property is secured, and that residents intend to return pending inspection." "Say that in English," Ruth called. "We get people uphill without letting Conrad call it surrender," Noelle said. "Better?" The chapel became a center of motion. Not panic, not yet. Logan would not allow it to become panic. He took the table at the front as he had in their planning session, but this time the lists were not theoretical. Names became bodies. Cabins became routes. Medicine bags became hands reaching for the right color tape. Ruth moved down the rows of chairs with a clipboard, checking medications and emergency contacts. Len tested flashlights, muttering encouragement to batteries as if they were shy children. Harold disappeared behind the chapel and brought the old pump to life with a roar that sounded like a bear learning profanity. Pastor Glenn unlocked the side office, the pantry, and the small back room where blankets had been stored since a flood 10 years earlier. Noelle radioed County Dispatch, then Captain Elaine Morrow, keeping her voice careful. Stillwater Bend is initiating voluntary temporary relocation due to rising water and access risk, she said. Repeat, temporary. Residents are documenting intent to return. I am on site in advisory capacity. Logan heard the restraint in every word. That restraint was courage-wearing handcuffs. Pearl refused to move until Logan took her back to the cabin. He did not argue. He pushed her wheelchair himself, Remy walking close at the right wheel. The lane had softened under them. Water ran beneath the snow in hidden veins. Pearl's cabin smelled of cedar, coffee, and the faint lavender soap she kept by the sink. "The sewing box," she said. Logan took it from the shelf. "No," Pearl said. "Open it." He did. Beneath the spools of thread lay the folded drainage map, already wrapped in blue cloth. Under that were photographs Logan had not seen before. Wes Benton standing knee-deep in a drainage cut, an old culvert half exposed in spring mud, a county maintenance crew near the lower Veer parcel before it belonged to Veer, a pipe with numbers stenciled along its side. Pearl's fingers brushed the edge of one photograph. He said if anything happened to the file, a picture still remembered light. Logan placed the photos and map into a waterproof envelope Noelle had given him. For a moment, Pearl did not let go. Then she did. That surrender cost her more than leaving the cabin. When they returned to the chapel yard, a white Veer Development SUV was waiting near the lane. Dale Rusk stood beside it in his black security jacket, orange cap darkened by wet snow. With him was the same young field representative who had posted the notice at Pearl's cabin. He held a clipboard under a clear plastic sleeve and looked miserable enough to be dangerous. "We're here to assist Mrs. Benton with safe transportation," the young man said. "No," Noelle replied before anyone else moved. "County relocation is being coordinated through the resident plan and documented by me." Dale would not look at her. His blue lighter moved between his fingers, useless in the wet. The representative forced a smile. "Veer Development has offered accessible transport. Given the contamination risk, vulnerable residents should be moved promptly to approved housing." Pearl's wheelchair stopped at the chapel ramp. "Approved by whom?" she asked. "Ma'am, this is for your safety." Remy stepped in front of her. He was still not fully strong. Anyone could see it. His hind legs trembled. Rain beaded along his black saddle and ran down into the gold fur of his chest. But he placed himself between Pearl and the white SUV with such quiet certainty that the lane seemed to narrow around him. The representative backed half a step. "Control the dog." Logan moved beside Remy, not in front of him, beside him. That mattered. "He is controlled," Logan said. "We don't have time for this," the representative snapped. "The river is rising." "Then stop blocking the ramp." Dale looked at Remy. Something in his face folded inward. Logan saw it happen, the security guard looking not at an animal, but at a consequence that had survived. Remy's eyes did not leave him. Dale turned away first, throat working as if he had swallowed a stone. "She goes with her people," Logan said. The young man stared. "Mr. Veer will hear about this." Pearl's voice came from behind Remy, dry as old paper and twice as sharp. "Good. Tell him I wore my nice shawl." Ruth snorted from the chapel door. The representative hesitated, outnumbered not by force, but by witnesses. Then he turned back toward the SUV. Dale remained a moment longer. "Lower road's going fast," Dale said quietly, not quite to Logan. Noelle's eyes narrowed. You know that how? Dale looked down at his boots. Because they checked it before coming here. He got into the SUV before anyone could ask more. The vehicle backed away, tires slipping once in the slush, and headed toward the rise. Noelle watched it go. That man is going to talk eventually. Not yet, Logan said. No. Pearl placed a hand on Remy's back, but he heard himself almost do it. The first warm rain began at dusk. It fell softly at first, a wrong sound in January, ticking on snow, chapel roof, truck hoods, bare branches. The white world turned gray by inches. Water ran down the lane in dark lines. The Elden River grew louder beneath the ice, as if something old had found its voice. Logan stood at the chapel doorway with the radio in one hand and Pearl's waterproof envelope tucked inside his coat. Behind him, the chapel glowed with lamplight. Ruth called names from the list. Len handed out flashlights. Harold cursed the pump into continued obedience. Glenn moved between frightened residents with a calm so worn it felt trustworthy. Noelle stood near the porch, speaking into her radio with rain shining on her ranger coat. Remy lay beside Pearl's wheelchair just inside the door, wet, exhausted, eyes open. Then water touched the lowest chapel step, a thin black sheet sliding over the wood. No one shouted. No one needed to. The bell above the small porch shifted in the wet wind and gave one soft, accidental note. Logan looked past it toward the river, toward the low road, toward the hidden lines West Benton had drawn and Conrad Veer had tried to bury beneath polished words. The night was no longer about proving who was right. Not first. First, they had to keep enough people safe to tell the truth when morning came. Logan lifted the radio. "Start the first group," he said. By full dark, Stillwater Bend no longer sounded like a settlement. It sounded like a river learning to speak through walls. Water moved everywhere, beneath the ice, under the snowpack, along the ruts in the lane, down the old drainage trench behind the chapel. It hissed, tapped, swallowed, and knocked softly against wood as if the Elden had grown fingers and was testing every door. Freezing rain came slantwise across the settlement, coating truck windows and chapel steps with a glassy skin. Headlights smeared through the wet air in long, pale beams. The small bell above the chapel porch rocked in the wind, giving out thin, accidental notes that vanished beneath the roar of Harold Tuck's pump. Inside the chapel, Logan Pierce sat at the central table. That was the hardest part, not the rain. Not the rising water. Not the voice on the radio cutting in and out as Noelle Carver guided the first convoy toward the high logging road. The hardest part was the chair beneath him, the paper under his hands, the knowledge that his body could still move and yet must not be used as the only tool in the room. His field jacket hung open over the olive-drab combat shirt. The camouflage sleeves were damp at the cuffs. A radio sat near his left hand, Pearl Benton's waterproof envelope near his right, and in front of him lay the resident list he had once thought of as preparation. Now every line had a pulse. Pearl Benton, wheelchair, medication bag, blue and red. Transport, Ruth Mallory's truck, Len Mallory, limited night vision. Keep with Ruth, Harold Tuck, refuses assistance unless insulted first. Logan had not written that last part. Ruth had. Group 1 clear past the chapel rise. Noelle's voice came through the radio, sharpened by static. Road is ugly but passable, sending Ruth back for Pearl once we get the oxygen tanks unloaded. Logan pressed the button. Copy. Glenn, confirm the south room. Pastor Glenn Avery moved through the chapel with a flashlight and his ring of keys chiming against his belt. His burgundy scarf was tucked into his old brown coat, and his glasses sat crooked on his nose. He looked less like a retired pastor now than the keeper of a small wooden ark built by committee. "South room clear," Glenn called. 2 blankets left, 1 thermos of coffee, 1 casserole of unknown origin. "Unknown origin means Ruth made it," Len said from near the door. Ruth, adjusting a crate of medication bags, did not look up. Unknown origin means you'll eat it and thank Providence. Near the back, an elderly woman with a terrier tucked under her coat began to cry quietly. Not loudly, just enough that the chapel seemed to hear it. Remy rose from beside Pearl's wheelchair, crossed the room with careful steps, and lowered himself near the woman's boots. The terrier growled once, thought better of it, and disappeared deeper into the coat. The woman stopped crying to look down. "That dog wet?" she asked. "Mostly," Pearl said. "He smells like a rug left in a canoe." Remy sighed. For the first time that night, a few people laughed. Logan felt the sound pass through the chapel like a match flame shielded by a hand. Small, mortal. Enough. He looked at Remy. The shepherd was stronger than he had been beside the frozen river, but not whole. His hind legs still trembled if he stood too long. Rain darkened the black saddle of his coat, and water beaded along the gold fur of his chest. Yet he moved from fear to fear, as if appointed by something older than any of them. Not leading, steadying. That was different. "Pearl's next," Logan said. Pearl, beside him, tightened her hands around the small wooden sewing box, now strapped to her lap with Ruth's green tape. The waterproof envelope of maps and photographs rested inside Logan's jacket, but Pearl had insisted on keeping the box itself. "It held the truth before you people got organized," she said. "It can ride with me." Logan did not argue. Outside, tires crunched, slipped, caught. Ruth's truck returned from the rise, engine growling. Len moved to the door with a lantern, shining it toward the ramp. "Pearl," Logan said, "I heard you the first 3 times." "Good. Then the 4th is tradition." She looked up at him, and even with rain tapping the roof and water climbing the steps, her mouth twitched. "You're getting bossy for a man who claims not to belong here." Logan paused. The words landed where he had no armor ready. Before he could answer, Remy came to Pearl's right wheel and stood there, head high, body angled toward the open door. Not between Pearl and danger this time. Beside her. Escorting. Logan looked at the dog, then at the chair, then at the ramp slick with freezing rain. "Harold!" he called. The old mechanic appeared from behind the pump room, soaked through his denim jacket, yellow screwdriver still somehow in his pocket. "If you say the pump died, I'm going to join it." "Need traction on the ramp?" Harold tossed down a strip of old roofing felt. "Already did, Admiral." "I'm not an admiral. Tonight you're whatever keeps people from driving into the river." Pearl's chair moved carefully down the ramp, Ruth guiding from the front, Logan steadying one side, Remy walking so close his shoulder brushed the wheel. When the chair hit the slick patch near the bottom, Remy stopped. Not sharply, just stopped. Ruth followed his gaze. The water had reached the low edge of the lane, sliding black over the snow. "Route 2, Logan said into the radio. "Pearl cannot go by the lower lane." "Use Chapel Rise only," Noelle answered immediately. "Copy. I'm turning Ruth's truck around at the high shoulder. Keep her there 30 seconds. Pearl looked toward the water. Her face did not change, but her hand closed over the sewing box. "Wes hated being right about bad things," she said. Behind them, from somewhere beyond the chapel yard, a shout cut through the rain. Harold turned. "What now?" A county pickup had stopped near the old service road, hazard lights blinking amber. Beside it stood Dr. Amos Klein in a brown olive coat, boots sunk in slush, plastic map tube under one arm as if the end of the world still required proper document storage. He was pointing toward the far side of the drainage trench. Noelle's Ranger truck pulled in behind him. Logan heard her voice over the radio before he saw her. "Logan, Amos found active discharge behind the Veer parcel. Water's cutting through the temporary berm. It matches Wes's red junction." Logan's grip tightened on the radio. "Say again." Amos took Noelle's radio from her, apparently offended by the quality of everyone's communication. "Water is coming from the wrong sainted direction," he snapped. "Which is to say, exactly the direction I said and exactly the direction West Benton drew. There is a temporary outflow behind Veer's lower storage lot. It is failing." Pearl heard him. Her eyes closed once. Not relief, not victory, something older and heavier, the grief of being believed after too many years. Noelle came back on. "I've called Captain Morrow. I need an official witness before the flow changes. Can you stay safe? Can you keep asking obvious questions somewhere dry?" That meant yes. Logan looked at Pearl. She opened her eyes. "Go document it." "No?" "Logan? No?" He pointed toward Ruth's truck. "You get uphill. The map is safe. Amos has eyes. Noelle has a radio. Harold can curse the pump without me. I stay on the list." Pearl stared at him. Something like approval moved across her face, though she made it look like irritation. "Well," she said, "maybe you can learn." Ruth loaded Pearl's chair into position with Len's help. Remy put his front paws briefly on the truck step, then stopped and looked back toward Logan. For 1 second, Logan thought the dog would refuse. Instead, Remy climbed in beside Pearl. Trust, Logan realized, was not always staying. Sometimes trust was leaving because someone had promised to keep watch behind you. The truck pulled away toward the chapel rise. The night tightened after that. More residents moved through the chapel in wet coats and frightened silence. Glenn prayed with a man who insisted he did not need praying for, but did not walk away. Tessa Ward arrived in a county library van loaded with bankers' boxes, blankets, and an expression that suggested she would personally catalog the flood if necessary. "Historic Society archives are on high shelves," she told Logan, dropping a folder on the table. "People first, records second, but I refuse to let both drown because men in expensive coats discovered waterfront ambition." "Good to see you, too," Logan said. "Don't get sentimental. I brought clipboards." At the far edge of the settlement, red and blue lights appeared through the freezing rain. Captain Elaine Morrow arrived in a state vehicle, her dark green agency coat zipped to the chin, short salt and pepper hair flattened by a hood. She stepped into the mud with the expression of someone who had no time for weather's theatrics. Noelle met her near the trench. Amos pointed. Harold, who had abandoned the pump only after calling it a coward and leaving Len in charge, joined them with a flashlight. Together they moved toward the drainage cut behind Veer's lower access road. Logan could not hear the words from the chapel. He saw enough. Flashlights angled down, Noelle crouching, Amos gesturing with a gloved hand, Elaine standing very still. Harold shining light into the water where a dark stream pushed through slush and broken ice. Then Elaine turned toward Noelle and nodded once. Small gesture, large enough to change the night. Dale Rusk appeared 20 minutes later. He came on foot from the direction of the Veer access road, soaked through, orange cap dark against his head, blue lighter clutched in one hand. He looked less like a guard now than a man who had wandered out of the wrong life and could not find shelter in it. Logan saw Remy before he saw Dale. Ruth's truck had returned after delivering Pearl to the gym on high ground. Remy jumped down stiffly and moved to Logan's side, shaking rain from his coat. When Dale stepped into the chapel light, the shepherd went still. Dale stopped. The two looked at each other across the wet yard. "Don't let him look at me like that," Dale said. Logan did not move. "That's between you and the dog." Dale's face twisted. "I didn't know he'd eat it." The words came out broken, half swallowed by rain. Noelle, crossing from the trench, heard enough to stop. Captain Elaine stopped beside her. Dale looked at the ground. "I was told to discourage strays from the lower parcel. That's what he said. Discourage. Dogs were making residents feel safe, making people linger. I put stuff out. Not near cabins. Down by the river trail. I thought—" He could not finish the lie. Remy stood silent, rain dripping from his muzzle. Dale's shoulders dropped. I thought if I didn't ask what it was, I wasn't the kind of man who'd done it. No one spoke. The river filled the silence. Dale pulled a folded paper from inside his jacket. It was wet at the edges. They moved barrels before the first inspection, put trash near the cabins after. Signs, too. I drove one of the trucks. I know where. I know who told me. Conrad Veer arrived before Dale could say more. His SUV came too fast down the service road, slid once in the slush, then stopped near the old boat launch where water already crossed the gravel. Conrad stepped out in a black parka, navy scarf tucked neatly despite the rain. For a moment, even in the storm, he looked composed. Then he saw Elaine Morrow, then Amos, then Dale standing in the chapel light with Remy watching him. Conrad's face changed by fractions. "Captain Morrow," he called. "This is an unsafe area. My team is here to secure documents and equipment before conditions worsen." Behind him, another vehicle idled with boxes stacked in the back. Tessa, from the chapel door, said, "That's a poetic way to say remove evidence." Conrad did not look at her. "I don't believe we've met." "I'm the librarian. We're what happens to paperwork when it survives men like you." Harold muttered, "I like her." Elaine stepped forward. "Mr. Veer, no materials connected to the reported discharge or environmental review leave this site tonight." Conrad's smile flickered on, automatic and thin. "I appreciate your concern, but my legal counsel will enjoy hearing the words active discharge, witness statement, and potential evidence preservation," Elaine said. Noelle stood beside her, rain running from the brim of her hood. She did not look triumphant. She looked tired, furious, and deeply steady. Conrad turned toward Logan then. For the first time, no polished phrase came quickly. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," Conrad said. Logan looked past him at the failing berm, the dark water, the old chapel lit behind frightened people, and the dog who had nearly died because men like Conrad preferred clean language for dirty work. "I think I'm starting to." The road beneath Conrad's SUV gave way first, not dramatically, no great collapse, just a slow, humiliating sink as water undercut the gravel near the boat launch. One rear tire dropped into a rut with a wet crunch. The vehicle lurched and stopped. Harold laughed once. "River votes no." Conrad turned sharply, but there was nowhere clean left to stand. Mud climbed his polished boots. Rain flattened his scarf. The man who had spoken of restoration stood in the runoff his project had tried to hide. By 10, the last Stillwater resident had reached the town gym on higher ground. "No one died." That became the sentence Logan repeated to himself as the chapel lights finally went dark behind them. No one died. Some were wet, some were frightened. One elderly man had lost a hearing aid and accused the flood of theft. Pearl had lost her cream shawl somewhere between Ruth's truck and the gym entrance, and Harold had spent 2 hours arguing with a portable generator that, by all accounts, argued back. 3 dogs and 1 offended terrier were wrapped in borrowed towels. But the list was complete. At the North Haven gym, cots lined the old basketball court, coffee brewed near the concession stand. The scoreboard still read, Home 42, Visitor 38, from some game nobody had bothered to erase. Pearl sat near the wall with the sewing box on her lap. Remy stretched between her chair and Logan's boots, wet and exhausted, but awake. Noelle stood across the room with Captain Elaine, both of them speaking in low voices over a folder of wet notes. Dale sat alone near the doors, a blanket around his shoulders, staring at the blue lighter in his hand as if it belonged to a stranger. Pearl looked down at Remy. "Wes used to say water remembers," she said. Logan followed her gaze to the dog, then to the gym full of people Stillwater had managed to carry out of the dark. "So do dogs," he said. Pearl's eyes found his. And soldiers? Logan did not answer at once. Outside, freezing rain tapped the gym windows. Inside, Remy shifted closer to his boot and let out a long, tired breath. Logan looked at the complete list in his hand, names checked one by one, and thought of all the years he had believed returning home was impossible because he had lost the road. Maybe the road had not vanished. Maybe, like the river, it had only been waiting under ice. After the thaw, North Haven did not become a better town overnight. It became a town with muddy boots in every hallway. Meetings filled the county building, the fire station, the library basement, and once, because nobody had reserved anything properly, the back room of Halverson's Bait and Breakfast. Folding chairs scraped. Coffee burned in metal urns. Clipboards multiplied like rabbits with legal concerns. People who had ignored Stillwater Bend for years suddenly discovered strong opinions about river management, emergency access, relocation language, drainage infrastructure, and whether the county had always meant temporary when it said voluntary. The truth had not arrived like lightning. It arrived wet, heavy, and inconvenient, wearing the smell of thawed mud. Conrad Veer's Elden River Renewal Park was suspended pending investigation. That was the phrase printed in the county notice. Suspended pending investigation. Not destroyed. Not defeated. Not finished. Logan Pierce read the words twice and found them strangely satisfying. Real consequences moved slowly. They needed boots, forms, signatures, witness statements, lab work, and the kind of patience that made angry people accuse justice of taking a nap. Veer Development was under review for improper storage, false site conditions, and possible concealment of a discharge point. Clearwater Civic Assessment was asked to provide full sampling records. Mason Drell, the technician whose signature had sat under the wrong conclusions, finally came in through the side door of the truth. He did not do it dramatically. He appeared at a county review session on a gray morning, thin-faced, wearing a cheap navy suit that had probably spent more time in a closet than in public. His hair was combed carefully, but one piece kept falling over his forehead. He looked like a man who had not slept well since winter began. He admitted the sampling location had been selected under client guidance. Noelle Carver, seated 2 rows behind the agency table, closed her eyes for 1 second. Captain Elaine Morrow, standing near the wall with a metal clipboard against her coat, did not smile. Elaine did not appear built for smiling in official rooms. Her short salt and pepper hair was combed back severely, her gray eyes steady beneath the fluorescent lights. She only wrote something down and said later, in a voice sharp enough to cut through every excuse in the room, "Procedure was not created to give cowardice a clean shirt." That sentence traveled through North Haven faster than any official memo. Noelle was cleared of misconduct 2 days later. Nobody gave her a medal. She would have hated that. Elaine made a brief statement outside the county building, confirming that Ranger Carver had acted within emergency advisory limits, preserved public safety, and maintained proper documentation under pressure. It was the driest praise ever given to a woman whose work had helped keep an entire settlement from being washed into the dark. Noelle stood beside her, hair half escaping its tie, ranger coat still carrying a faint stain from the thaw mud. When a local reporter asked how it felt to be vindicated, Noelle looked at the microphone as if it had committed a minor crime. "It feels like there's still riverbank to stabilize," she said, "and people need access before the next storm." Then she walked away. Logan liked her better for that. Stillwater Bend itself looked wounded. The water had not taken it, but it had left fingerprints. Mud along cabin walls, warped boards on lower porches, a picnic table lodged against a cottonwood, firewood scattered like bones. Pearl Benton's ramp had shifted 3 inches to the left. Harold Tuck claimed the ramp was making a political statement, then spent 5 hours correcting it with a jack, 2 blocks, and language Pastor Glenn Avery pretended not to hear. The chapel had survived. Barely, if one listened to Harold. "Structurally insulted," he said, tapping the wet floor with his boot. "Not dead." Water had soaked the lower boards of the rear wall and crept under the old pine floor near the pantry. The foundation held. The steeple still leaned, but it had leaned before the thaw, and Glenn insisted a straight steeple was often a sign of spiritual overconfidence. 3 days after the residents returned to inspect damage, Glenn stood in the chapel doorway with his keys in one hand and a broom in the other. "We could use it," he said. Pearl, wrapped in a dry blue shawl Ruth had found for her, looked up from her wheelchair. "For what?" "Soup," Glenn said. Harold stared at him. "You flood a building and your first thought is soup?" "My first thought was mildew. Soup came second." Glenn turned toward the room, toward the muddy boot prints, the damp pews, the table where West Benton's map had once lain under lamplight. "There are people along the river who will need a warm place again, not just Stillwater, the outlying cabins, the old road farms. Anyone who loses heat, gets snowed in, needs coffee while waiting for a ride." Ruth Mallory leaned against the door frame with her arms crossed. "You proposing a shelter?" "No," Glenn said. "A kitchen, a place to begin before fear gets big enough to need a shelter." That was how the idea started. Not as a grant, not as a campaign. As a man with keys saying soup in a wet chapel. By the end of the week, the work had begun. Harold gathered retired tradesmen with bad knees and strong opinions. Len tested every flashlight in a 30-mile radius and labeled batteries until Ruth threatened to label him. Tessa Ward found county records on temporary community kitchen permits and arrived with a folder so thick it could have stunned a raccoon. Noelle helped with safety access routes and posted river-level notices near the door. Captain Elaine approved a temporary emergency use plan with the enthusiasm of a woman allowing common sense to exist under supervision. Pearl donated use of the back room of her cabin for dry storage. "You sure?" Logan asked when she handed Glenn the spare key. Pearl looked at him. "Mr. Pierce, I kept a drainage map in a sewing box for years because no one would listen. I am ready to store something more cheerful than proof." A church in town donated an old commercial stove. It arrived on a flatbed under a tarp, dented on one side and blessed by 3 generations of pancake breakfasts. Logan bought a safe generator and 2 emergency light kits from his savings, then said nothing about it. Tessa found the receipt anyway, because Tessa found everything. "You know, anonymous donations are harder when you use your own name," she told him. "I didn't write anonymous." "No, you wrote equipment." "It is equipment." "It is kindness wearing steel boots." Logan looked at her. Tessa smiled slightly. "Relax. I won't put that on a plaque." "Good. I might put it in the minutes." He walked away before she could see him almost smile. At his own cabin, change came slower. No thunder, no revelation. No morning when Logan woke healed, washed clean by one good deed and a loyal dog. He still woke too early. He still stood sometimes in the kitchen without knowing why he had entered it. He still heard Marin's last sentence when the house grew too quiet. "You came home, but you never came back." There were mornings when guilt sat beside the coffee like an old commander waiting for a report. But he opened the curtains now. That was the first thing. Then he left a water bowl near the back door because Remy had taken to dividing his loyalties between Pearl's cabin, the chapel, and Logan's place with the grave authority of a sheriff who had never been elected. Sometimes the shepherd slept on Logan's porch, sometimes beside Pearl's wheelchair, sometimes under the chapel table where soup onions fell like divine favor. One evening, the phone rang. Logan saw Marin's name and nearly let it go. He stood in the kitchen while the ring sounded once, twice, 3 times. His thumb hovered over the screen. Remy, lying near the hearth, lifted his head. Logan answered. Neither of them spoke at first. Then Marin said, "I heard about the river." Her voice was older than he remembered, or maybe he was finally hearing the age he had placed inside it. "North Haven talks," Logan said. It always did. A pause. "Are you all right?" He almost gave the old answer. "Fine." The word rose automatically, polished smooth by years of misuse. He looked at Remy. The dog's amber eyes held him in that merciless, steady way of his. "No," Logan said. The silence on the other end changed. Then he added, "But I'm not staying there." He did not apologize. Not yet. Not because he did not owe one, but because he understood for once that apology was not a flare to fire into someone else's sky. It was a road that had to be walked with both feet. Marin breathed out softly. "That's something." "Yeah." Another pause, gentler this time. "Take care, Logan." "I'm trying." When he hung up, nothing in the kitchen transformed. No music swelled. The old ache did not leave. But it shifted just enough to make room for the next breath. The chapel kitchen opened on a Saturday when snow returned. Not hard snow. Not the wet, punishing weight of the thaw. This snow fell softly, bright and slow, touching the repaired porch rail, the new ramp boards, the stacked firewood, the small sign Glenn had painted by hand and hung beside the door. River Chapel Winter Kitchen. Hot soup. Safe heat. No one turned away cold. Harold had objected to the wording. "Sounds like we're inviting freeloaders?" Ruth had looked at him over a pot of beans. "You are a freeloader with tools. I bring value. You bring noise. Noise keeps morale up. Then congratulations. You are a church bell with pants." The first pot of soup steamed by noon. Beans, ham, onion, potato, pepper, and whatever Ruth called enough garlic to make grief step back. Bread came from the bakery in town. Coffee came from a borrowed urn that Harold inspected 3 times and insulted twice before declaring it unlikely to kill anyone before supper. Pearl sat by the window peeling potatoes with a small knife, her sewing box on the shelf behind her, no longer hiding the only truth that mattered. Noelle pinned a fresh drainage route map to the side wall where anyone could see how water moved, where access roads ran, and what to do when the river rose. Tessa set up a sign-in sheet and donation ledger with the expression of a woman building a small fortress out of paper. Glenn moved between tables with his keys chiming and his eyes warmer than the stove. Remy became the kitchen's quiet rule. He did not greet everyone. He inspected. He passed slowly between tables, scarred ear tilted, black and gold coat brushed, but still carrying the roughness of river weather. When a man in a patched coat sat alone with shaking hands around a coffee cup, Remy lowered himself near the man's boots. When an elderly woman apologized for asking for a second bowl, Remy rested his chin on the edge of her bench until she forgot to be ashamed. When a childless widower cried into his napkin because the soup tasted like something his wife used to make, Remy did not look at him. He simply stayed close enough that grief did not have to sit by itself. Logan arrived after noon, carrying a box of emergency batteries and pretending it was the only reason he had come. He paused in the doorway. The chapel smelled of hot soup, fresh wood, wet wool, dog fur, coffee and onions browning in butter. It smelled like work, like warmth being passed hand to hand before anyone's fingers went numb. No stage had been built. No banner praised him. No one asked him to speak. Thank God, Logan thought. Then Glenn saw him and lifted a ladle in greeting. "You're late." "I brought batteries." "Ah," Glenn said, "the modern loaves and fishes." Harold called from beside the stove. "Tell him we still need a proper outlet by the back wall." "We still need a proper outlet by the back wall," Ruth repeated, then added, "and someone to keep Harold from marrying it." Logan set the batteries down. Remy rose from beside Pearl and came across the room. He did not hurry. He never did when the matter was important. He stopped at Logan's left side and leaned his shoulder against Logan's leg. Solid, warm, real. Something in the room grew quiet without being asked. Logan looked toward the old wooden cross on the wall. It had survived the flood, though the lower edge had darkened where water touched it. Glenn had sanded it lightly but left the mark. Logan bowed his head. He did not know how to pray well. He did not have Glenn's warmth, Pearl's stubborn faith, or Ruth's ability to threaten heaven into better behavior. His words came rough, almost embarrassed. "Thank you, Lord," he said quietly. "I'm still here." That was all. It was not elegant. It was not enough to repair 3 years of absence, or a marriage, or the dead, or every wrong thing that had gone unnamed in him. But it was true. When Logan opened his eyes, Pearl was watching him from the window. She did not smile exactly. She gave a small nod, the kind one survivor offered another when both knew applause would cheapen the thing. Noelle, standing near the map, looked down at her boots as if giving him privacy in a room full of people. Harold cleared his throat. "Well, since divine matters are settled, somebody hand me that screwdriver." Laughter moved gently through the chapel. Outside, Elden River ran under broken ice, carrying mud, thaw water, and old secrets into daylight. Stillwater Bend had not been saved perfectly. No place was. Some cabins needed rebuilding. Conrad's investigation would take months. Clearwater would blame procedure before it blamed profit. Dale Rusk would have to live with what he had done and what he had finally said. But the chapel stood. The soup was hot. The generator was safe. The names on Logan's list were still living names. He took a bowl from Ruth and sat beside Pearl near the window. Remy turned once, lowered himself between them, and rested his head on his paws with a tired sigh. Snow fell outside in bright, patient flakes, softening the mud but not hiding it. Logan watched it come down over the river, the repaired ramp, the tire tracks, the chapel steps, and the people arriving one by one from the cold. No one there had been saved cleanly. No one had walked through winter untouched, but they had not been washed away. And in a small river chapel that smelled of soup, wet dog, new wood, and stubborn grace, that was miracle enough. Sometimes grace does not arrive like thunder. Sometimes it comes as a wounded dog by a frozen river, a neighbor who refuses to leave, or a small chapel filled with hot soup when the world outside feels too cold. Logan's story reminds us that healing is not always about becoming whole overnight. Sometimes it begins when we stop trying to disappear, take one honest step back toward others, and let God use our broken hands to keep someone else warm. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us who Remy reminded you of, and if you believe stories of loyalty, faith, and second chances still matter, please subscribe and walk with us into the next one. May you find warmth where you least expect it, and may grace meet you gently on the road home.